Por favor,
Please, can we stand up to listen to the Spanish national anthem?
señores altos representantes,
High Representative of the European Commission, Chairman of the Constitutional Court, President of the General Council of the Judiciary, First Vice President of the Spanish government, President of the State Council and Vice President of the Senate, Head of the Opposition in the Catalonia Parliament, former High Representative of the European Union, Secretaries of State and Undersecretaries, authorities, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. As Chairman of Nueva Economía Forum, I would first of all like to welcome you to this Teatro Real, the best in the world, declared last year as best in the world as opera theater. And thank you for attending this ceremony to hand over the Award for Sustainable Development, Geopolitics, and Social Cohesion from the Nueva Economía Forum of 2022 to be awarded to Mr. Josep Borrell, who is Vice President of the European Commission. This ceremony is going to be broadcast by the 24-hour ceremony channel and in our webpage as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel very proud today to celebrate this event, also to celebrate our anniversary. Nueva Economía Forum has always been a place for debate. We are independent, have an open mindset, and we want to contribute through dialogue and the dissemination of ideas and constructive ideas. Spanish society can find channels for the recovery of the economy, and for Spain to play an active role as member of the European Union, as an essential ally of the Latin American countries, an active player in the world economy. Thank you so much for the support of the speakers and the institutions they represent. In our meetings, we have representatives of the Spanish government, of the most important institutions in our country, representatives of the European Council, Spanish political parties, and the European Parliament, as well as leaders from many countries and also leaders of civil society. We would like to thank all those companies and individuals who support our work and guarantee our independence. Thank you so much to the professionals who cover and participate in the events and debates. And thank you to all the participants and the diplomatic corps in Spain. And allow me to talk about the constant contribution and good advice of those who make up the circle of trust of Nueva Economía Forum. From different points of view and sensitivities, they represent Spanish civil society and the international community. Therefore, they give soundness to the activities that our organization carries out in Madrid and in another 6 Spanish cities. Nueva Economia Forum, which was able to recover after the pandemic. We would like to once again renew its commitment to continue forward with the same purpose, with a great effort from the team of professionals and associates of our organization, to whom I would also like to express my recognition. The Nueva Economia Forum to Sustainable Development, Geopolitics, and Social Cohesion was set up in 2003. In its different editions, it has been received by the UN Secretary General, presidents of Argentina, Chile, Argentina, Mexico, Italy, and Portugal, the presidents of the European Council, the Parliament, the European Commission, and the European Central Bank, the Secretary General of the OECD, the head of the IMF, and also members or the creators of the Spanish Constitution. We are going to hear the speech from Nadia Calvillo, First Vice President of the Government and Minister of Economic Affairs and Digital Transition.
Querido Pepe,
Dear Pepe, ambassadors, authorities, head of the Constitutional Court, friends, I have been misleaded when I came here because I could never imagine that we were going to find ourselves in this forum full of people in such a formal event for which I have prepared a very intimate and personal speech, which I hope that will please you in any case, to introduce this very special moment. And how wonderful to see this theater full of friends who have wanted to be with you today, Pepe. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in this first event of the year of Nueva Economia Forum, and more particularly to participate in handing such an important award to recognize the work of my colleague and friend, Josep Borrell. With this award, we recognize his trajectory, his work for the European Union and Spain. He has been the High Representative of the EU. And this morning, I was thinking that there is no better time to appreciate the work that the High Representative and Vice President is carrying out, because what a difficult moment for him to do this job. Who would expect that we were going to be experiencing the current circumstances? Javier Solana knows a lot about these things, and he is going to go over your professional experience. So I'm going to share a few more personal thoughts, which I have checked with people who know you, who've known you for longer than I have, including the president of the government, Pedro Sanchez, who would have liked to be here. He couldn't make it, but he expresses his appreciation for your work. I was going to share a few thoughts, but I have to start with the most important thing, what explains everything about Pepe, which is that he loves mountain climbing. Every time he can, he goes to the mountain. I think contact with nature is absolutely essential for him. But I think that the fact that he loves the mountains explains that we're talking about a strong person, always active, always looking for new horizons. And he knows that in order to make progress, you have to put one foot in front of the other and check your balance. He is a man of strong convictions. We're all aware of that. He has a great mind, and he defends his point of view with courage, never taking a step back. His opponents in the Spanish parliament know that. Nobody who could beat you in the debates, everybody feared you. And all Spaniards know this. When we remember how you rejected with arguments and conviction the breaking of coexistence in Catalonia because of the independentist movement. I don't think anyone will forget your role back then. You have the respect of your opponents and the admiration of most Spaniards. I already admired you and respected you when we met in the first government of President Sanchez. Pepe is a family man, too. He always speaks with devotion of his children, of Cristina, of course, your spouse. For her, you fear not only love, but admiration and respect. And finally, Pepe, he has many interests, but he always has been, well, he's been Secretary of State of Treasury. He is no high representative, but all of that has a secret, which is that he is an aeronautical engineer. And I think that gets you ready for everything we have to do now in Spain and in Europe, which is to fix the engines in flight, or I would say more, turn a car that is used to roads to an airplane and then to a rocket that can get anywhere where it is needed. Everything in full flight. So as a Spaniard, it is a pride and a privilege to have people like you with your experience and commitment serving our country and serving the European Union. And I wanted to take this opportunity to share this moment with you, congratulate you for this well-deserved award, and thank you from the bottom of my heart, your dedication to public service that you made available to Spaniards as a minister and now at the service of all Europeans. So without any further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Javier Solana, whom I am convinced is going to talk about your professional experience. Who better than he can understand the responsibilities attached to the position that you hold now. Congratulations and thank you. Good day, everyone. For me, it is a great honor to have been invited to talk about Jose Borrell. I don't think he needs any introduction in this room, but we've had some experiences together which I think are very interesting for the history of Spain, a very special part of Spanish history, and also for the very special history of the European Union. I feel enormous respect for Jose Borrell. And if I may, I'd like to say that I feel admiration for him. I'm a bit older than him, not too much older, but we've known each other for many years. We lived and met in Franco's Spain when both of us had the right age to begin our political activity and go to university. We lived a very active life then with Pepe Borrell, who has a privileged mind. Sometimes you can even hear him think, and when you hear him think, that's not where things end, because he has the ability of expressing what he's thinking which I'm sure there are not many people in our country that can express their thoughts as well as Pepe can. And when he's expressed it, he realizes that he then needs to put it into practice, because Pepe Borrell basically is a man of action, a man who knows that one must think, but most of all, if we want to change things, we need to act. And this is one of the things I like the most about him, because he is a fighter who sometimes leaves some people along the way, and those people may not like him, but at the end, I'm sure that they will appreciate your good work. Nadia said that Pepe is an aeronautical engineer, which is saying a lot. Of all the engineering careers, the one that requires more study, especially in mathematics, is aeronautical engineering. Therefore, Pepe is a very good mathematician. He's also a professor at the University of Madrid of economics. In other words, it's not enough for him to fly, but he also wants to teach. And he wants to teach something which is economics, which is what you've been doing in your public positions. He's been minister in Felipe González's government, and a good minister. He was part of the government of González, his second government, his second mandate. He was Minister of Public Works, and you can tell. And if you're traveling by car or train, you might remember that he was an excellent Minister of Public Works in Spain. But not only that, after that he went to the European Parliament. And at the European Parliament, he was one of the great leaders of the Social Democratic Party of the European Parliament. So much so that he was appointed for President of the European Parliament. President of the European Parliament is a very important position. It's very difficult because there are many cultures, many languages, many countries, but he did an excellent job. And not only that, afterwards, he was president of one of the most important institutes that the European Union has, and not everyone is aware of this. The European Union has in Florence a piece of land with buildings from who knows where, marvelous. And there is an institution which is the Economic Research Institute, where he was one of its chairmen. It is the Centers of Intelligence of the European Union, and he was chairman of that as well. During the week, Pepe seems to be traveling every day, and it is true. He does travel a lot, but he has to go to Brussels during the week because he is a member of the commission who is in charge of security and foreign policy, and he must debate and create consensus in the Union about these subjects. But not only that, when he sits there, he's also representing Spain because he is the commissioner that Spain has in the European Union. I don't know if you realized that the fact that he is still alive with all the things that I already said he's done is extraordinary. You're a genius, you're a great person, you're a great friend. We've had marvelous times together because, as Nadia said, he is a great mountain hiker. a great mountain climber. In the months of summer and the fall, he loves to visit the mountains in the most beautiful places that you can imagine. And sometimes we've walked together those mountains. And when winter comes and the snow falls, he goes to the mountain, but to ski. So he takes care of his body as he takes care of his mind and his heart. You are a great person, Pepe. I hope you will last us for a long time. I hope you're able to bring peace to the Ukraine. For that, you can always count on my support. It is a pleasure having met you.
Muchas gracias, doña.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Javier, for your words. Now I'm going to read the testimonial brought to us by the President of the Senate, Mr. Ander Gil. It says, I would like to emphasizing something specific about Josep Borrell is truly very difficult because there are many outstanding aspects about this brilliant politician. He is an excellent person and a great friend. I should begin, for example, by talking about his wonderful trajectory in Spanish politics as well as in European politics. His fabulous university education. Borrell has been almost everything in institutions, and when we see him today, we can think of one single concept. He's tireless. When I look at the things that he does, how he travels to different countries to explain the position of the Union, or when he talks about the need for Europe to consolidate its own political identity, or his efforts to make sure that we are protected vis-a-vis Putin's aggressions. Borrell is being a key in promoting European Union in one of the most difficult periods that a high representative for foreign affairs and security policies has had to face. None of his predecessors has had to face such a world situation and such a very complex and threatening geopolitical situation as the one that Josep Borrell is facing ever since he took on this position. And he has done it, and he does it with the greatest courage. That is how Borrell is, says the President of the Senate. He doesn't stop. He works non-stop, tirelessly, showing an incredible energy. Foreign affairs and those related to defense are very complex, but the head of European diplomacy and vice president of the Commission has carried out and carries out an excellent exercise of diplomacy. He does it when he needs to meet with opponents, but also when he addresses those who attack other people's or their own. And it's even more valuable now, his work, than at any other time, given the situation we're in. He establishes dialogues, he reaches consensus, but sometimes he must warn and launch an ultimatum. He shows the best of people who act according to their convictions, but also to the needs of peoples in the most difficult circumstances. I wish him the best of luck in his efforts to make the European Union more robust, because we all depend on that. Congratulations for the award Nueva Economía Forum. Those are the words of Mr. Ander Gil, who is the chairman of the Spanish Senate. Next, we will deliver the award. Authorities, ladies and gentlemen, after consulting the members of the Circle of Confidence, Nueva Economía Forum, in its 22nd edition, has decided to award Mr. José Borrell Fontelles in recognition of Spanish society to his trajectory, characterized by his permanent commitment to the European Union and Spain, shown very clearly in his performance in current circumstances as the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Parliament. The award you see is has been prepared in Valladolid, and the President of the Constitutional Court, first Vice President of the Spanish government, I ask you please to award the prize to Mr. Josep Borrell.
A continuación,
Next, Mr. Josep Borrell Fontelles will take the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I need to thank Nueva Economía Forum. Thank you so much, José Luis. I'd also like to thank the people who have been so kind as to speak about me in such kind words and terms. Thank you so much, Nadia. Please convey my thanks to the President of the government and the other ministers. Thank you, Javier, for your kind words. You're a great friend. We've been together through many things in the Sierra of Madrid, in the Pyrenees, and also in the paths of Europe. We've walked them together. Thank you to the President of the Constitutional Court for honoring me with his presence. I think this is your first public event after your appointment. And thank you to all the people who are here that I cannot mention one by one, but each one of you represents a little piece of my life. I'm going to try to begin with the Vice President of the Senate, since we're talking about my life. And next, the people who have also been a part of my life since the times when a young engineer, I worked in the Spanish Petroleum Company. I still have a few friends from back then who are here. Many when I was at the Ministry of Economics, Finance, because I spent there almost 8 years. It was very hard work. I thought it would never end. But now, fortunately, people no longer tell me this is a guy from the IRS. But that's how people talked about me back then when I was responsible for the taxes, the tax policy in Spain. But Spain today has an excellent tax authority. And also we have people from when I was at the Ministry of Public Works. I was Minister of Public Works, but I had other responsibilities as well, and so I was very lucky to see Spain changing from that Spain, not a modern Spain, to a Spain now which has modern infrastructures, extraordinary infrastructures we have now compared to what we used to have and compared to other developed economies. And I was part of that. I was part of that process of modernizing our infrastructures. And I did this with many colleagues that I would like to thank for their many hours of fruitful work. And then came Europe. And there are people here who held positions as the ones I held too. Enrique Barón, President of the Parliament, Almunia, Vice President of the Commission. They know very well what that signifies. And the colleagues from the Socialist Party, the Lord Mayor of Valladolid, and many others that I cannot mention here because I would leave too many out, or Euro MPs, Carlos, and others who shared with me hours of debate at the European Parliament, and some colleagues in the European Convention when we tried to write a constitutional text for Europe in a process that did not succeed because we were ahead of our times, most likely. And I don't want to leave anyone out, but I'm afraid I'm leaving many people out. The Secretary General of the Catalan Socialists, the President of the Council of State, the Chambers of Commerce, the former ministers of Foreign Affairs, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I'm going to do as I do in Brussels, TUI Protocolo Observé, which is a way to include everyone. Well, yes, thank you, everyone. It's very difficult not to feel moved at this moment. I have a couple of texts here to read, but my two best public interventions, it came straight from the heart without preparing them at all. The one in October 2017 in Barcelona, where I said that borders are the scars that history has left in the skin of the earth, or that of the European Parliament when we were talking precisely about scars and borders, when I tried to explain why Europe had to commit itself directly in the defense of Ukraine. And the worst intervention, because I've had bad ones too, but the worst one was the one that I had prepared the most in a debate of the State of the Nation, which did not turn out to be too good. So, acknowledging my mistakes, I think the best thing that I can do today, following my experience, is not reading what I had prepared to let my heart speak. First of all, because I don't have too much time, and secondly, because when you speak from the heart, it sounds much better than when you try to read paragraphs when there's a piece of paper between the voice and the mind. The voice not always reflects everything it's thinking. So I'm going to just tell you what I'm thinking. My collaborators in Brussels always tell me, "Hi Rep," that's how they call me. "Hi Rep," you have to say the truth. Yes, of course, we need to say the truth. You need to say only the truth, but not necessarily the whole truth. And that's something I'm going to do here. I'm not going to tell you the whole truth, but I do promise not to do analogies or comparisons which can then be used to get me into trouble. Oh, I forgot to greet someone. I'd like to greet the Russian Information Services, whom I am sure are listening to me now. And after, they will use every word I say to put me into a difficult spot. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what have I done to deserve this? As the song says. What have I done to deserve this? To be here in this beautiful place, such an important place in Spanish cultural life, surrounded by so many representatives of this life. What have I done to deserve this award? I must have done something. And yes, I'm sure that President Putin is sure that I've done something, because in private conversations and some public statements, he makes me responsible for European military intervention in the war of Ukraine. And if he says it, it must be true. But no, the European Union is not participating in the war in Ukraine. We are not part of the war. We don't want to be part of it. We have tried to avoid it. And I think we've have succeeded in not being a part of it. Because if European countries would have gotten directly involved in the war, the situation would be dramatic now. But yes, we are helping Ukraine. We're providing Ukraine with military help. How did it happen? Well, at the beginning of last year, I think it was on the 6th of January, when the war drums were sounding, I visited well, I have to say that the war did not start in February. It started in 2014, when part of its territory was taken away from it by force. And then a war started, a sporadic war, but with casualties in the line of Donbass between the two provinces claimed by Russia. It was a winter, and I remember that trip very well, with the military convoys, houses destroyed, the sound of machine guns. It already smelled of war. When going back to Brussels, I stopped in Kiev, and I met with the Prime Minister of the Ukraine, and he told me, Russia, they've concentrated 150,000 men in our borders. I don't think that is for nothing. Russia is going to attack, and when Russia attacks, we know you're not going to come to help us. We know very well you're not going to send European youth to fight beside us. You won't want to have casualties. But please, at least when we are attacked, will you give us the weapons so that we can defend ourselves? I couldn't answer that question at that moment. Will you give us the weapons so that we can defend ourselves? Stand in the skin of someone who has been a prime minister who has been threatened. His country has been threatened. We had spent money to consolidate its democracy, and asks, when they attack me or us, will you give us the means to defend ourselves? I couldn't say yes, because that requires a unanimity of 27 member states, and not all of them think alike. And they still don't think alike. And that was on January the 6th. After that, I returned to Brussels and started frenetic diplomatic activity to start to stop the war. And in my life and in my memories and in my background, I asked myself, have we done everything possible to avoid the war? Could it be avoided? Why did it happen? And I remember the dates where there were visits and telephone calls to Moscow, to European leaders. I remember the letter that the Lavrov sent to the European ministers, my response to Lavrov on behalf of all my colleagues in the council saying, no, we're not going to send 27 letters that are the same. Let's send just one single letter representing all of us. And that's how I did it. And on February the 9th, I sent a letter to Lavrov where I said that the European Union was willing to sit down and discuss the conditions of security that Russia was claiming, even the concept of the indivisibility that Russia was talking about since the fall of 21, and that Putin had already talked about in 2007 in Munich, but nobody listened to him. That was my response to Lavrov, and his response was, I'm writing to 27 heads, and I get the response from a bureaucrat in Brussels, and that's where it all ended. That was February the 9th. Days prior to the 24th, European leaders, all of them called Moscow, Macron, several times. I'm not going to read the whole list of visits and calls, but until the last minute, Europe tried to avoid the war. And when on the 23rd, the council ministers met, we had information from intelligence that told us that the war was going to start very soon. And we leaders did not want to believe it. European leaders could not believe that that could happen. By the way, the Ukrainians didn't either. They told us, don't make so much noise about the war because you're causing a fleeing of capital, and that is going to hurt us. You're causing an economic crisis talking so much about the war. Possibly human beings don't want to believe things that they don't want to happen. Perhaps our psychological mechanisms told us, no, that is impossible. It cannot happen. We think that because we don't want it to happen. And we can't even think that something as terrible as launching a military conventional attack that is going to cause thousands of deaths could be still in the mind of a political leader. We didn't want to believe it. But when on February the 24th at 5 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang, I knew it had happened. And when the voice on the other side of the phone told me, they are bombing Kiev, I realized that the history had turned a page and that we were going into a new era. Immediately, we got to work and drew up a list of economic sanctions that were going to be imposed on Russia, as always. And another question came to my mind. Can't we do more? Can't we do more than just economic sanctions? That country is our partner. If Russia can invade the Ukraine and set up a puppet government as they have in Belarus, and they have borders with Poland, who's going to end up losing? The Ukrainians, of course, but what about us? Can't we do more? And yes, of course we could do more. We have a fund that we had set up without thinking about Ukraine. The European Fund for Peace is how we call it, although now it's going to serve to stop war. But it was thought of to provide countries like African countries with weapons to do military training. We didn't think of this for lethal weapons for a war, but the aeronautical engineer who lives inside me thought, if you think it's a good idea to give African countries weapons to defend themselves, to fight jihadist guerrillas. Can't we give it? Why can't we give it to a country with whom we have even stronger links, and that is facing an invasion where its survival is at stake? Why not? Where is the no rationale here? Well, it's never been done before. Well, there has to be a first time. And in less than 36 hours, the 27 member states agreed that we would mobilize a European fund to arm Ukraine. And we were asking all member states that they too did it bilaterally. And something that had never been done was done, and is still being done. And we've been added since more than 3.5 billion since. But you have to add to that what the member states have done on their own. I don't know how much it is. They don't tell us, but I can more or less estimate. And if we add everything up, we can say we're talking about 10 billion euros in military aid. The U.S. has done more, yes, 17 billion from the U.S. But if we add everything that Europe has done for the Ukraine, not only military support that I was behind, yes, I recognize it, and I support it still, but also economic aid, humanitarian aid, all sorts of aid. It's almost 50 billion euros. And that places us above any other country or any other regional group, more so than the U.S. Yes, I know that military aid from the U.S. has been a determining factor, and ours is second to the American one. But it is not irrelevant. It does count, and a lot. Not as much as what the U.S. has done. Without the U.S., only our support would have been enough. But that makes me think something else. What would have thought if instead of Biden, Trump had been at the White House? In what geopolitical situation would we have been? What would have the U.S. done? And what can happen or could happen in the future if another president comes along, a U.S. president? Well, that means that we have to take on even a greater responsibility. In order to trade, you need the will of one and the agreement of the other. But for a war, it's just enough for one to want to start a war. Our world today is not like we would like it to be. There are people who are willing to use violence to do things their way and shape the world their way. So we need to continue to do what we've already started to do, have military capabilities, have the political will of making use of them when necessary. And this military support has completely changed what Putin thought would happen. First of all, he launched an attack to occupy Kiev and failed. I was in Kiev, and I've seen the Russian tanks that were hit next to corpses in lines and lines of tanks. 1,650 tanks that were hit by the Ukraine forces. You can go into a web page and you can see where each one of these 1,650 destroyed tanks are. It's many, many tanks. All European armies together don't have that many tanks. Russian losses have been unthinkable, unimaginable. If Putin would have known that was going to happen, he would have thought about this twice. And I'm sure he wouldn't have launched the attack. In terms of human losses, they're not counted, but we know there are many. I'm not going to give a figure, but tens of thousands, also civilians. It's a bloody war. A war that unfortunately is not going to end tomorrow. And for it to end well, the Ukraine has to win. Many people tell me Stop helping the Ukraine. Can't you see that the more you help it, the toughest is the war and the more deaths there are? Yes, that is a definition of uh, something that is not thinking straight. But if I don't help, if I stop helping, what would happen? You don't care? Yes, the war would end, but how would it end? The important thing is how it ends. And the only way for the end of the war to guarantee permanent peace is for Putin not to win, not to occupy the Ukraine, and not be there at our borders thinking about the next step of his colonial expansion. Because that's a colonial mindset. I know that we Europeans are not innocent when we talk about colonialism, but that is what is happening. Putin doesn't want to rebuild the Soviet Union. He knows that nobody wants to live again in a communist regime, but he's doing it on behalf of exacerbated nationalism, imperialistic mentality, rebuilding the Russia of the czars, and reclaiming what he thinks should belong to Russia. But how many borders can blow up, and how many more wars will we have to face if that continues? So this war can only end so that we can ask for political responsibilities and moral responsibilities and criminal responsibilities to those who started it and carried it out and waged it. That Ukraine has to win and recover its sovereignty. And I don't know how much it would cost to rebuild the Ukraine. It will be a long and expensive road to get there. But the Ukrainians tell us, why don't you send me more anti-air missiles? We like your electric generators, but if we don't get more weapons, it's not very useful. Yes, we need to guarantee, because there are 4 million Ukrainian refugees in Europe. 10 came, 6 went back. Now we thought that there was going to be another wave of refugees from the Ukraine because Putin is leaving Ukraine without electricity, and at those very low temperatures, you can't really live. But there they are, defending their country. They're staying there. We don't see masses of Ukrainians fleeing, which is what Putin wanted to provoke. But the Ukraine is a great nation. They're used to fighting, and they're almost used to losing and then recovering. It would be observed. We cannot think that their Russians are incompetent. Until now they're not winning, but they are still very strong. And this is why we need to continue to arm the Ukraine with whatever they need to do the war that must be waged. Not only a defensive war, but a war that will allow them to take on the initiative, break the fronts, and allow in a few months for Russia to or to prevent Russia from launching another bloody initiative. And without the war in the Ukraine, the position of High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security wouldn't have so much visibility, and I would have preferred it. I would have preferred it that you had no reason to give me this award, because behind this award there are many deaths. There is a lot of suffering, not only in the Ukraine, in the whole world. This war has caused an increase in energy prices and food prices that has generated hunger in many parts of the world. And that is something that we must have in mind as well. We are convinced, because it's true, that this is an unjustified aggression that infringes international law, the Charter of the UN, and that must be condemned and repressed. But let us not think that everyone thinks the same. There was 154 votes in the UN condemning the invasion, because how not to do so, something so obvious. Only the three normal suspects, you know who they are, voted in favor of Russia. But since there's been more and more abstentions, and what my experience tells me, what my contacts tell me, is that we Europeans must understand that there are many faces to the truth, and that not everyone sees things like we do, and that we shouldn't force changes in position of countries that don't want to take part in this. In Latin America, there is still a lot of anti-imperialistic feeling. In Africa, anti-colonialistic feeling. And they don't forget that the defense of democracy in Latin America sometimes has been forgotten or fought by those who are asking for it now. We need to feel more empathy. We must try to understand others' reasons and how they are affected by our actions. Every time we make a decision in fighting against climate change, we must understand that there are many countries that are affected by this. Affected in a way that we must understand and help them digest it. No, the world is not aligned, ideologically speaking, with us for many reasons. For interests, for values, and that diplomatic struggle we have to win as well. It's difficult. This is a war that is not waged only with bombs on the battlefront. It's also done in the propaganda, information, speeches, narratives. We must conquer, or at least we must work on the minds, on opinions of many thousands of millions of people who are affected by a war that they have nothing to do with, and they think to be falling. And so the economic disaster that Putin wanted to happen has not happened. But we must be resistant and constant and keep up the effort and the fight, because Putin knows that democracies can be weak sometimes. With our public opinions, we must explain what is at stake. It's not only the Ukraine, which is it's a certain way of seeing freedom in the world. It's a way of seeing how this world has to face great global challenges. And that would be my final message. Each one of us, each one of you should be able to explain the reasons why, without participating directly in the war, we are participating in the defense of an attacked country. Surveys say that 70% of Europeans are in favor of the support we provide to the Ukraine, but it depends on the country. Some support more in more countries than in others. And the rest of the world, the global south, we must work there too with political pedagogy. We must convince them why we're doing this. I think I've gone on for too long, and now I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you so much, Mr. Borrell, for your lesson of life and lesson in politics. We have the great honor of hearing now from the President of the Constitutional Court. I must confess that I've known Jose Borrell for many years, So my first words cannot be only to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here in this very important moment. My first words must be to show my satisfaction as a Spaniard, to congratulate a great Spaniard, a great man that represents us magnificently throughout the world. He himself talked about the difficult circumstances that we're going through right now and the role that he is playing on behalf of Spain and of Europe. Dear Josep, congratulations for your great work, for this very well-deserved award. I must congratulate you. At the same time, from this gratitude, I must also applaud the efforts made by Nueva Economía Forum, which has turned into a center for the exchange of ideas, of debate, economic debate, but also political and social debate. Precisely for that reason, this time you have chosen a universal Spaniard for your award this year, Josep Borrell. We've already heard about his wonderful work and experience, and Javier Solana talked, I think, very clearly about his great merits. So I can't really add much to what has already been said. I can only say that all those words of praise, Pepe, are true, exact and necessary and well-deserved. I would just like to say that your experience, we've heard about your experience here. It is very difficult to find the experience you've had in anyone else. Technical experience, humanistic, scientific, academic, politics, well, in every single aspect that you have had experience, and you've been very brave in very difficult moments, and you've been very brave also in very difficult moments for Europe. The challenges Europe is facing must make us think that we are a community of law whose main strength is in the values that we share, in the principles that we respect, and in the rights and freedoms that we protect. As Camus said, it is a matter of conciliating justice and freedom. The life of every man should be free, and that the life of every man is fair for everyone. The Constitutional Court in Spain is truly in favor of Europe. We're in favor of European integration. We protect the principles of the Union in our country. It supports a Europe of law, of rights, that we must promote even beyond our borders, and it supports an open dynamic between the national and the supranational that we have to be a part of. As president of the Constitutional Court, but most of all as a personal friend of the awardee, of the winner of this award, the combined success of the rule of law and the work of great men like Josep Borrell will continue to build Europe to become